I wonder, just maybe, emerging regions need a little bit of a step up. Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and this is Clearing Vision MSI 2023. For those of you who are new here, I've watched every single playoff of all the regions who have qualified within MSI. Asterisk, I did not watch any of Winter LEC. No, I've mentioned it previously videos, you can find it. That said, MSI has started. Come and play-ins are done. Last chance qualifier is done. We've had a very solid first week, and we got a lot to talk about, including expectations of different regions, what's coming up within the bracket stage. Riot Games promised a different jungle meta. Did they actually get a different jungle meta? The surprise is that there's nothing surprising about that result. And more importantly, is there room for scaling, or should there be a focus only on early game? But before we do that, let's take a look in the review of every single game we've had before we say goodbye to the teams. It's day one with Group B play-ins, round one. Pair Saint-Germain, Talons versus Detonation, FocusMe. And as much as this was expected in terms of results, Game 2 gave a lot of hope that Detonation will show some signs of life in the lower bracket. The Talons are just much cleaner in terms of coordination, neutral setup, vision, and late game approach. There's still that major concern on how long they take to end games, and as the competition will get rougher, the longer game delays will become harder to justify, as some of these teams just will punish any hesitation. Detonation still show that aggressive style that they hold. It still works, but without the same kind of confidence and dominance that they're used to in the LJL, it just falls flat. The Talents could hold them off until they got to a point they were comfortable with, and I think that with this particular series, the Talons show that they are likely to go all the way through the upper bracket into the next stage of the tournament, no problem. While Detonation needs to course correct to see if their current strategy even works, or at what pace do they even want to find success. My MVP for the series is Utapon, who, when push comes to shove, was the late game insurance that guaranteed this 2-0. And we're in the play-ins of MSI for Group B, Round 1, G2 Esports versus Loud of Brazil. And frankly, G2 continued to really push my belief in them, positively and negatively. While this was the expected result, G2 opt for drafts that are a little bit more difficult and very early game focused, while Loud stuck to some of their tried and true drafting that they have employed throughout the split. And it played out mostly as foretold. Root would be the facilitator for when leads are met. The rest of Loud would not be able to keep up, and the clutch factors that exist in G2 would kick in. And in a game 2, as Loud didn't have a lead and Rout was just struggling, they folded incredibly fast. And I don't think this will change before their matchup in the lower bracket. G2 showing such wild swings is also not giving me much confidence that they will be able to walk through onto the next stage with zero issues. In fact, I don't think they might win that upper bracket getting dropped down. Yeah. But my MVP for the series does go to Yike, who, with 2 Nidalee games, makes this champion look like it scales to infinity. Damn, those freaking spears were just gnarly. And we're back with Group A in round 1. Bilibili Gaming versus Rainbow 7 or Movistar R7. Honestly, the fact that Miru was ahead in both games and was expected in this was kind of expected in this situation, but the series highlights the weaknesses that this roster will have on the international stage. The lack of pressure, vision, consistent neutral presence, heck, even just in the laning phase, R7 was completely outmatched, and I don't think they'll do much better against anyone else going forward. Bilibili, for their part, did as expected of them, hold on strong leads and close them out quickly. I don't think they'll have as dominant of a series moving forward, but if they keep this up in terms of vision and neutral control, they should have zero issues, especially outside of the laning phase. Now that said, moments of the series still showed that they have the same kind of pains that have affected them during the playoffs lingering around. That can itself be taken advantage of in the next round of the play-ins, but that really depends on who they face off. My MVP for the series is Elk, who was just dominant on the stage. Like, these are some ridiculous leads in the bot side. Holy. In Group A, still in round 1, we've got Golden Guardians versus GAM Esports. Where was the GAM I know and love? Huh? They played shy, reserved, and never attempted to control the pace of the game. Now, we could argue about the draft styles, but even then, GAMs usually would play extra aggressive to compensate when they were behind. But without that kind of pressure, the other issues that the team usually has props up even more. The inconsistent approach to side lanes, bizarre draft choices that require lane dominance primarily, utter lack of deep vision, and rushed neutral approaches. Now that said, Golden Guardians' win wasn't just from a disappointing play from the part of GAM. They continue their trend of leveling up over time, series after series, with vision near immaculate, coordination incredibly on point, well thought out, flexible drafts, and properly allocating the attention to where it needs to go for their win conditions. Now, I don't know if the way in which they absorb pressure and control the tempo will work in the next round on the upper bracket, but they are making an incredible solid case for the Guardians to be one of the 3 teams to get to the bracket stage. And honestly, it would be easy to see why. My MVP for the series is Huhi, who continues to enable the team via vision, engage, and zone tools. He just really catches you off guard. And we're back within play-ins in round 2, upper bracket, Group A, Golden Guardians versus Bilibili Gaming. Now, this was the expected results. Games 1 and 3 played out how most people would expect. Calm, collected, Elk firing on all cylinders. Now, Game 2 is notable because of how the Guardians came back. Now, the Guardians rightfully addressed both teams' win conditions, and while having had a major setback, still actively work towards those win conditions. Now, and in doing so, they create one hell of a comeback that gives them a pretty strong case for being the 3rd team to qualify for the bracket stage for play-ins. Now, I do want to see the Guardians holding a little bit more confidence, or at least early game agency, as to avoid needing a late game assurance going forward. Bilibili, now having qualified, are still showing some growing pains, but in all honesty, the gameplay is pretty clean, especially from games 1 and 3, that it doesn't surprise me if they make at minimum round 2 within the bracket stage. And I'm kind of wondering how many teams can actually compete against them that aren't one of the LCK reps or JD Gaming. My MVP for the series, as always, is Elk, who continues to be a shining beacon of success for BLG. He's just maximizing damage all the time. And we're back within the play-ins, Group B, round 2, upper bracket. And honestly, this was really good to see. Well, first off, Saint-Germain Talons versus G2 Esports, and it was really good to see from G2 Esports as we head to the bracket stage. Now, Game 1 showed some of their weaknesses around closing out some games consistently, and while their vision, coordination, and neutral approach was fairly solid, waiting so long against a team that specializes in late game approaches was not a solid move from them. Game 2 rolling around, and from minute 1, holding full control of the pace and tempo of the game. Excellent stuff, but nothing here fully convinces me they'll be able to handle the likes of T1, Gen G, JD Gaming, or Bilibili, even, for now at least. The Talons, for their part, falter in the ways that we expect. Their safety shows itself for what it is in action. The slow gameplay, reactive approach against teams that play at full pace, even if a little imperfect from their opponents, doing nothing, but will just lead into one thing that will happen. Losing to those teams who know how to close out games. I still think that out of the remaining teams, the Talons will eke it out, but unless they refine their draft and or their whole approach, they may lose out to the likes of Guardians or even Detonation FocusMe. My MVP for this series is Broken Blade, who applied so much pressure solo and in team fights to swing the tide of gameplay regularly off his back. I just didn't even know you could do that as Olaf at level 1. Holy. And we're in the lower bracket, round 1 of play-ins. Group A, GAM Esports versus Movistar Rainbow 7. And we bid farewell to GAM, and also the expectations that came with the VCS. I'm honestly baffled by their performance in this tournament. Bizarre drafts, lack of early game aggressions, especially the kinds that we expect from them, uncoordinated team fights, and just posturing only to only punish egregious mistakes from the LLA reps. I would hope that GAM takes this experience to realize their shortcomings, improve them over the summer, and come out better for Worlds, but we'll see. Now, Rainbow 7, for their part, massively impressed me here. The coordination, early aggression, and solid understanding of win conditions is exactly what was needed to take down the very meager approach that came from GAM. Now, I have some issues regarding their pacing. How often do you need to stall and lose complete leads because of disjointed commitment before you learn to add aggressive tempo to the play and commit to a decision? Golden Guardians won't let you get away with it like GAM did in this series. Well, we'll have to see. My MVP for the series is Audi, who applied so much global pressure early on to propel Rainbow 7 to the next round. And we're back with play-ins in round 1 of the lower bracket. Detonation FocusMe versus Loud of Group B. And we say goodbye to Detonation FocusMe, whose early game antics could not get them where they needed to go. Now, Game 1 felt like a much too big of a risk with these kinds of stakes to take, holding all of your hopes that Steel would carry the game heavily enough to transition the team into a good late game. While Game 2 did have a lot more options to work with, you can tell they were still looking to Steel to control the game early. And it's not like Detonation didn't show up at all. The coordination early game was present, but they vastly underestimated the teamfight coordination and neutral approach that Loud had today, and were punished rightfully so. Loud, for their part, show incredible coordination and neutral approach, kind of expected, but not to this degree. But their vision is so severely lacking. Regardless of how much vision denial you put in, without the actual control, you'll struggle to keep up in the long run. Loud proved that the CBLOL is doing its due diligence with the prep, and if they can, they'll have a serious shot at taking down PSG, but the coordination and neutrals are just on a different level from them. It's going to be a very stylistically similar matchup, but they need to fix that vision to actually pull it off. My MVP of the series is Route, who, for just the incredible team fighting and upkeep and damage, just really good. And we're back with MSI's play-ins in Group A's round 2 lower bracket, Rainbow 7, or Movistar Rainbow 7 versus Golden Guardians, and we say goodbye to Rainbow 7. And they're really solid play from MSI, but it just wasn't enough. The lack of early proactivity, vision that was very, very weak, neutral approach that was kind of timid, and while the coordination was there, the leads were never developed for any particular role, leaving Rainbow Seven with drafts that are incredibly sensible, but no resources to show for it. The Guardians have played some of the cleanest games I've seen from them ever. From start to finish, full control of tempo, vision, neutrals, and having a much stronger coordination just in general around team fights. I don't like how their draft setup relied on really early game lead necessities, as that kind of habit could bite them for the last chance qualifier. But from what I saw, it seemed like they understood who they were facing and matched that head on with the preparation. My MVP for the series is Licorice, whose pressure nullified Bong and the very core of Rainbow Seven's draft and engage tools. And on top of it, his teamfighter is just so good. And we head off in MSI's play-ins, Group B, low bracket round 2, Loud versus Saint-Germain Talons. And we say goodbye to Loud, who, despite the solid performance so far, did not have what it takes to take out the solid showing from the Talons in this series. Now, Loud had some incredible drafts, solid skirmishes, but no tempo control for both games. Top that off with inconsistent vision, coordination that was kind of lost, Robo being left on an island, and hesitation towards some decisions, we wind up with a recipe for disaster. The Talons this series impressed me, especially in Game 2. Now, Game 1 felt like more of the same, solid control around vision and neutrals, coordination that is just on top of it all, and them waiting far too long to end a game. But Game 2 rolls around, and at this time, they play towards their drafts early game, which is a surprise. This time, they increase the tempo, also a surprise, and not by a lot, but they start doing it. They end up pre-game 30 minutes at a sensible time when they have control, not opting to scale a million win conditions and actually ending a game. Now, it makes me think that they have a chance at the last chance qualifier, but we'll see. My MVP for the series is Ubao, whose map-wide influence coupled with his approach to teamfighting made Loud have a rough time. And we're back to MSI in the last chance qualifier. Saint-Germain Talons versus Golden Guardians, and we say goodbye to the Talons. And honestly, I think that fans of the PCS have a right to be disappointed of their representatives. The Talons already had a regional issue of creating games that were too long, winning off of punishing their opponents more than anything else, and late game macro choices that good, but still require it to get to late game. And again, while their late game and vision play is excellent and caught off guard many teams, all it took was for any team to play aggressive and consistent early games to close it out fast enough. Speaking of which, Golden Guardian being the second team now to punish it and did it in a very specific fashion. They attacked Saint-Germain in the ignored lanes, and since many of them were at any given point, it was fairly simple for them to develop early leads, stronger vision, which was kind of unexpected, and overall better skirmishing power with these drafts, as well as with these solid neutrals that they were developing. I will say, at moments, they look disjointed or over-eager on the play, but I still rather that than a slow team with zero approach to early game aggression. It's just a question of, can the Guardians keep up with every team in the bracket stage having early game prowess and team fighting strengths? They're making a good showing of it so far. My MVP for this series is River for his absolute early game dominance and shutting down Junja to control the tempo of all three games. But it could have gone to literally anyone in this roster. Well, what an interesting set of games we've had to handle here. I've been quite happy with a lot of the performances from any of the teams. The only teams whose performances I'm not happy with are Detonation, FocusMe, and GAM Esports. And unfortunately, we say goodbye to many teams. Those two including Loud, Rainbow 7, and Saint-Germain. people from Latin America, from either Brazil or Latin America Spanish, you should be happy with some of the performance that you had. Yes, I understand. We would prefer that they passed and gone through the last chance qualifier, and one of those two teams made it through to the bracket stage, but we are here mostly due to, I would say, all four of these teams suffered from an ability to take their early games and transition them to success. All of the three teams that did qualify, Bilibili Gaming, G2 Esports, and Golden Guardians, played incredibly solid early games and transitioned them into success and close out the games before they became too unruly. Golden Guardians being, I would say, the middle of the two of consistent versus inconsistent. But as we'll talk about those teams as we head into the bracket stage. But from what I see here is that the Paris Saint-Germain is probably one of the most disappointing teams, or at least this roster has been the most disappointing coming out of that region. Especially a region as historic as the PCS, previously LMS and GPL. You would hope that they would be able to call out and punish the bad behavior or the bad mistakes and choices from these teams more consistently. But that's not what we got, which is quite frankly unfortunate. As it comes to Loud, who really overperformed more than anything else, their lackluster performance right before the last chance qualifier is more symptomatic of their macro choices not being so consistent. Rainbow Seven under the same bus, having very limited ability to play to their strengths. And the most disappointing of all, GAM and Detonation FocusMe both never got the chance or didn't ever bring the chance to show what made them tick in their own specific regions. Their dominance within team fighting, their ability to mix and match chaos and macro choices that would usually punish teams that are overcommitting on bad plays. I really was hoping so desperately that they would make a comeback from the situation, but here we are. Teams that I thought would be able to contest G2 and Golden Guardians came and went with little fanfare, and that's really disappointing. And so we say goodbye to these 5 teams, and we have 8 that remain. So let's talk about those teams. Let's take a look at this bracket stage, because the draws themselves wasn't a big fan of for what is going to be the most likely result. An LCK LPL upper bracket final and an LCK LPL lower bracket final, but many people expected that to be the case regardless of how this drew out. It's just that upper bracket is going to look very LCK LPL heavy, lower bracket is going to look very EU versus NA heavy. Many of the teams are going to eliminate their counterparts in that particular fashion, but upsets exist. Well, let's see if they can upset anybody. Going around matchup for matchup, Gen G versus G2 I think is one of the more exciting ones. The prospect of Gen G being challenged early game and have a fairly chaotic matchup should be an interesting challenge for them, especially since that is exactly what T1 does, but G2 seems to be a lot more on the page of what they want to do with their win conditions than T1, but are not as refined in their execution for it. So it's just going to be a matter of, can G2 clean it up just enough? Just enough. Mad versus T1. I'm really hoping that T1 gets their act together, because Mad Lions has an amount of coordination around neutrals and especially around late game that could honestly bring T1 a run for their money. But if T1's on the ball, which they usually are in international tournaments up until the finals, it should be very difficult for Mad Lions to actually get a word in edgewise in terms of also the gameplay, just to do anything really. Now, the second half of this is the one with the most amount of chaos and ability for upsets, right? North America versus LPL. North America's had weird, interesting times to upset this particular region. So Cloud9 versus Bilibili Gaming is going to be explosive. Bilibili Gaming has shown in the play-ins that they can play early game with restraint and control, but that is not their MO most of the time. And Cloud9, that is their MO, but they also are very good at adapting through metas in international tournaments. The most successful organization in international tournaments in terms of at least Worlds. So it should be fun to see how Cloud9 is able to use their control and see if they can push Bilibili into positions where they will flub their play, which is what tends to happen when they are pushed to the brink. Golden Guardians versus JD Gaming. I do not expect much out of the Guardians. Just flat out, JD Gaming to me is still the favorite to win the tournament. So anywhere up, I expect them to go this best of 5, next best of 5. And then, like, it's going to be 4 wins in a row. Easy peasy, right? But Golden Guardians have been on an upswing, continuously improving and getting better and better, just overall. And part of me would be incredibly hyped to see Golden Guardians come up with an upset on the tournament favorites. I just only see a world in which Golden Guardians properly control the early game in a dominant fashion, because the way that their most recent best of 5 showed it, they can wrestle early game control, but sometimes they overforce and are overzealous, and it makes it a little harder for them. So it's just a matter of seeing how that goes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that this is going to play out a little different? Do you think that maybe the European and North American teams have a chance at, like, way stronger of a chance at upsetting their LCK and LPL counterparts? Or do you think it's just going to be a one-sided affair? Or do you think there's a little bit more mix and match scenario that can happen? The ones that are more question marks for me are around the C9 BLG and Gen G G2 matchup. Those are the ones with the larger question marks in my mind, at least. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Last on the docket, for now, at least in terms of the conversation pieces that I have set up, is the jungle meta. There was a piece in video and in writing, so they had dev blogs and dev updates written out where their goal and intention with 13.8 being the MSI patch that was going to be very esports focused was that the jungle pool and jungle meta had gone stale without any really strong, like, variety per se. I kind of disagree partially with the variety aspect. Amongst the 13 teams throughout the split, they have a total of 26 jungle champions, of which there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, in the top 10, all of them have at least 8 games played across all 13 of these teams. And out of that, the top 14 have at least 5. And when compared to the top 14 teams here, the only difference, the only change that has happened amongst the top 14 champions, because there's only been 14 champions, is an introduction to Kha'Zix and Poppy in replacement to Belveth and Jinzhao. What a swap, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the priority on Wukong has lessened, but lessened does not mean gone, and he's still pretty up there. Same with Vi, same with Viego, same with Kindred, Sejuani. It's all the same. And honestly, they also mentioned in those dev blogs and the videos that they're happy with the state of the meta so far, and they didn't want to change too much of it from playoff to MSI, other than the jungle change. And I'm glad the actual jungle change itself isn't too far different. There's definitely a stylization of, like, more possibilities maybe. But that's the proof in the stats there are kind of damning more than anything else. So, does this count as a success? No. I think that overall, the patch and balance changes hasn't done enough to change the meta itself, but it has done a lot to maybe scale back things that could have been a little bit more egregious going into MSI. If every region came in with the same ideas of 13.5 and 13.6, we would have, I would say, a more wild and volatile difference in interpretations of the meta, because every region had a very wild and different interpretations of the meta outside of the jungle rule. So I'm kind of happy that everything has been put in line and that there's an actual equal footing in terms of drafting and how to approach the drafts and then the win conditions once put in place. So to me, I think of this as success, as we're going to be able to evaluate teams as they qualified in MSI, which is the utmost importance to me. In an international tournament, the closer we can be to the teams that were in their playoffs to here means that we're going to get a tournament that is more representative of their region than anything else. Outside of fumbling their own performance. But it is a failure in the intention that they wanted. I cannot stress this enough. How do you want to change a jungle meta that has still quite a bit of variety in them? I've not seen a jungle meta this diverse technically in a while, right? We don't have anything that's so crazy, and we have a nice balance of damage dealers, skirmishers, bruisers, and tanks and engage tools. Like, there is the variety there that was kind of requested. It's just on the surface, when you keep seeing Wukong, Vi, and Sejuani over and over again, I can understand the balance team going, maybe we should scale them back, but not understanding what kind of tools they were providing for the lanes that were popped through. Heck, I think the thing that was killed was Veigar, not the jungle. Where's Veigar? Nowhere to be seen. Not a single game. He's gone. But at least that's from my observations. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think this was a success in terms of the patch? Not. Why not? Do you have the same kind of mixed feelings with it, or like mixed understanding of success and failure, where you're like, yes, cool, things have not changed too much, but you fucked up in your approach? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them about everything we've talked about in this video. I would again thank everybody for watching. If you'd like to see more stuff, meet the teams and Road to MSI videos are going to be on each end. That's pretty much it. You all have a great day, and I'll see you next week after the first round of bracket stage is done.